Welcome to the second webinar in our DEI series, The Power of Connection with Diverse Communities. My name is Diana Edwards. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a member of the membership development team here at Rotary. I will now turn this session over to your moderator, Beth Keck from the Rotary Club of Bentonville, Arkansas, USA.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you so much for taking us through the logistics for our webinar today. This is a part of a series of webinars that the Rotary International is putting on in support of our policy statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we started this series in September, where we did the first session on designing an inclusive plan for your organization. And I encourage you to view that webinar if you have not already. We have some really exciting news. In September, our Rotary President Holger announced the formation of a Rotary Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And this task force is going to be looking at the current state of DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, the acronym is DEI, and then putting forward a vision and a plan that's going to help guide our future in this area. And it's so exciting to see our highest level leadership giving us this guidance and taking leadership in this important area for our organization. So thank you, President Holger. So today, again, our topic is the power of connection with diverse communities. And we have three objectives for today's session. The first is to learn about the topic of the concept of unconscious bias. Second, we want to look at really look in depth at the value of what the value is with connecting with diverse communities. And then finally, identify concrete approaches that we can take to build authentic relationships, and particularly when we're doing our service projects. So the way we will approach today's webinar is that I'll have a dialogue with our three speakers, and then we're going to go to the Q&A. And I want to thank all of you. When you were registering, there were some really thoughtful, insightful questions that you gave us, and we really appreciate your thoughtfulness and participation. And so now I'd like to introduce our speakers. And I've asked actually each of our speakers to share an inclusive greeting that they use when they're at their club or in their community. We'll start with Rodney Galat. Rodney is the president of the Rotary Club of Colorado Springs, Colorado, USA. And I want to note that he is the first Black president of this club, which I believe is over 100 years old. So Rodney, please introduce yourself, and I'm looking forward to your words of inspiration.
Thank you, Beth, and hello world. Greetings, my fellow Rotarians around the world. My name is Rodney Galat Jr. My pronouns are he and him. I am a certified ethical hacker and the proud president of the Rotary Club of Colorado Springs, the most outstanding Rotary Club in the Pikes Peak region. And we are living in unprecedented times. As Rotarians, we rise to the occasion, still wiping out polio and solving problems around the world. We are people of action. We are winners. And together we empower others to win through our example. The four-way test unites us all. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? In the immortal words of Chadwick Boseman as King T'Challa, I leave you with this. We will work to be an example of how we as brothers and sisters on this earth should treat each other. Now, more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rodney. And thank you for those wonderful words of inspiration. We all are one wonderful tribe around the world. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker today, Sadia Khan. Sadia, her pronouns are she and her. And Sadia is with us from Alberta, Canada, from this town of Red Deer. She's a member of the Rotary Club of Red Deer Urban Spirits. I really love her club's name. and she is the chair, the DEI chair for her Rotary District 5360. Sadia, I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Beth and Rodney. That was amazing. What a great start. Hello, good afternoon, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. I will start with acknowledging the land that I'm joining you from is Turtle Island, Treaty 7, Urban Spirits, Red Deer. That's the name of the city that I live in Alberta, and Alberta is a province. And Turtle Island is now known as Canada. As a settler to this land and in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to honor the authentic history of Turtle Island, its original people, and the story of the creation of this country that has historically been missing. And like Beth said, I am the chair for the DEI committee here in District 5360, Zone 28.
Thank you, Sadia, and that was a very beautiful, inspirational words of wisdom. Now let's look to our third panelist, Grant Gordino. His pronouns are he and him, and Grant is coming to us from Australia, where it is actually Friday morning. So happy Friday morning, Grant. Good to see you.
Happy Friday, and thank God it is Friday. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I meet. For me, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders both past, present, and future. And I invite you all to also reflect on the elders that have looked after and cared for the country that you come to us from. We know that the experience of colonialism around the world has not been a kind one for many Indigenous populations around the world, and we know that is certainly the case in the United States of America, in Canada, in parts of Asia, in many parts of Africa and New Zealand, and also here in Australia, where we are doing all that we can to acknowledge our traditional owners and custodians and bring around reconciliation for past wrongs that my ancestors have even done.
Thank you, Grant. And I want to point out that Grant is from the Rotary Club of Strathmore, Victoria, Australia, and he is also the president-elect of our LGBT Rotarians and Friends Fellowship, and I happen to also be a member of that. Let's now turn to our objectives for today. And as I said earlier, one of our objectives today is for us to better understand unconscious bias. In our September webinar, we did a tutorial on the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion to just create a base foundation for those concepts and terms. And so today we'll look at unconscious bias, and Sadia is going to take us through a tutorial on this. So Sadia, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Beth. So when we talk about unconscious biases, if you have a brain, you have biases. Unconscious bias is a set of thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that we are unaware of and which happen outside of our control. So to better understand unconscious biases, we need to know where they come from. And as human beings, we have a natural tendency to categorize things when we categorize people based on their identity and characteristics. Think of, such as age and gender and race and so on. So as humans, we make thousands of decisions every day. However, our brains don't give each decision equal attention. So in return, what's happening is our brain is taking mental shortcuts. And these shortcuts are known as biases. So we absolutely all have biases. They help us in certain cases, and they really hinder us in others. So you might ask, can we truly eliminate biases? And the answer to that is no. We are conditioned by our upbringing, our society, our culture, our past lived experiences. This process is known as social categorization, which is a natural cognitive process by which we place individuals into social groups. So social categorization occurs when we think of someone, let's say as a man versus a woman, or an old person versus a young person, or a Black person versus an Asian or a white person. And there isn't anything wrong with that. Social categorization is a fundamental cognitive process, and it helps us make sense of the world that is around us, the world that we live in. So when we socially categorize, we start thinking of a person as a member of a particular group rather than as a unique individual. A single observation or few questions only provide a really small sample of an individual. And what it does, it covers only some of the dimensions about the individual, but very few specifics. So when we start putting people, and perhaps only one person that you may have met from a particular group or a community, in a box, or maybe you had a negative interaction with one person from a certain group, what happens in return is you, as your biases kick in, you start associating the entire community with negative stereotypes. And that is often caused and reinforced by the normalization of certain power dynamics, so such as historical, cultural, institutional, and interpersonal. And that regularly advantage the dominant culture groups. So while producing inequalities for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So in the next slide, you'll see the Kahneman model that divides the mind's process into two distinct systems. So most of our unconscious biases originate in system 1, and there are certain types of biases that can originate in system 2, like confirmation bias. So when we think about system 1, I want you to think about, this is the brain's fast and automatic and intuitive approach. System 1 activity includes the innate mental activities that we're born with, such as how is it that we perceive the world around us? How do we recognize objects, orient attention, or avoid losses? Thinking of fear of spiders. And other mental activities become fast and automatic through prolonged practice. Now, thinking about the system 2, this is where the mind's slower and analytical mode, where reason dominates, comes in. So this is usually when system 2 is activated when we do something that does not come naturally to us, and it requires some sort of conscious mental exertion. So this is where you do the self-reflection piece, and this is where you're thinking about, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling uncomfortable in this situation? So just to quickly wrap this up, because I'm limited on time, I want you to think about how quickly do we make assumptions, which in turn become implicit biases, and I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much, Sadia. And this is really, I think, helpful to help us really think through about bias and how we each individually approach life. And it's helpful to put some science against this as well. So thank you. In talking to all three of you as we were preparing for this webinar, I learned that each of you were serving as a bridge for our organization in each of your own individual ways. And I'd like for you to each tell us about how you have approached being a bridge, and how you have articulated or explained the value of connecting with diverse communities. And Grant, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, so when we're out there serving our communities, we have a really strong responsibility to make sure that we are representative of the entirety of the communities that we serve. And look, when I've used that statement in the past, I often have people telling me that to use a quote, there's no gays in the village, or there's no culturally diverse people, or there's no disabled people. And for people that tell me those things, I say, you're not looking hard enough. There's many different types of disability. There's plenty of gays, whether or not they're closeted or not. So we really need to make sure that we are being representative, because people that are part of those minority groups, people that have a diverse and intersecting identity, they're there and they have unique perspectives and things that they can tell your club. So we need to acknowledge them, we need to welcome them, and we need to make sure that we're giving them a chance to speak up. They might not be the extroverts, the bridge builders like Rodney, Sadia, Beth, and everybody else that is standing around us, but we do need to include them, be inclusive beforehand, and we've got some tips coming around that, and make sure that people know they're welcome at your club.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. And Rodney, tell me about your experience of being a bridge builder and how you articulate the value.
Well, let me start by saying this. For those of you being a bridge, you have to be ready to be walked on. Connections are valuable. When I came into my club at Colorado Springs, I was the only African-American man in the room. So what did that mean to me? It meant I needed to be a bridge so that this room can reflect a greater voice in the community. The greater the voice, the greater the impact. I get a great satisfaction being part of an organization that changes the world for the better, like Rotary. How can I be a beacon of light for this good work? I already stood out by being the only African American in the room. What else can I give people to pay attention to other than what I look like? I got involved in service projects. I got involved in the board. And through this, authentic conversations and trust evolved. Where there is ignorance, there is an opportunity to educate. Through temperance, fortitude, and love, I've gone from being the only African American in the club to being the first African American president in 104 years of the club. And through this work, I'm not the only African American in the club anymore. The bridge work that I've done and what I inspired others to do has diversified our membership over time, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be part of such an amazing Rotary Club where our members are embracing their potential for greatness. That's my first bridge. Second bridge, how can I bring other people in? It takes excitement in what you are a part of. People around you will receive your energy from that experience. Show the community through the work you do and the public image you create in your community. Through the law of attraction, diverse communities will organically want to be a part of your Rotary Club. I'm connected to several organizations in Colorado Springs, and I love connecting people in those groups in meaningful ways. Those connections grow community and Rotary. Lastly, sometimes people don't know that they have bridges that need to be built. And when you don't have a bridge, you need to make one. So one way to do this in your club is with your programs. Who are you getting to speak at your club? Find diverse voices and topics to bring to your club to expand their knowledge. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Use those digital methods to reach out to other clubs and other people who can share their knowledge. Does your club need help understanding how to cultivate diversity in their clubs? Ask Sadia to be a program. She has so much knowledge to share. Ask Grant to be a program. I have an amazing friend here in Colorado Springs, Dr. Regina Lewis. She's an expert at having these challenging conversations that help us grow. Get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with her. She spoke at our last High Country Pets Conference, and it had a profound positive impact on our region regarding diversity, inclusion, equity, and unconscious bias.
Rodney, that's great. And I love the energy you're bringing to your club and all the different bridge building approaches that you've just shared with us. Sadia, your thoughts on your bridging that you're doing and the role that you play?
Yeah, Rodney and Grant covered it all. So I'll just add just a little bit to it. You know, I look at myself as the bridge because I am a woman of color in my own community and within my own club as well. So I belong from a diverse community and I'm a Rotarian at the same time as well. So bringing in that, you know, making those relationships happening and being the bridge and saying, okay, these are the needs of the diverse communities. This is what the work that we need to be doing and then bringing that over to Rotarians as well. And always challenging and saying, we need to have these hard conversations, right? So going back to what's already been talked about, that's really important. And then creating that impact and the effect, the work from the district to the club and being very intentional about the work that you want to do in your community.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. You know, we've been doing these, actually we just put up the diversity, equity, inclusion statement. And Sadia, do you have any comments on that statement and its usefulness to your bridge building?
Absolutely. You know, Beth, when this statement came out here in Alberta, in our district, what the conversations that I was having is we need to break this statement apart, and we need to have the deeper conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to look at what does diversity look like, because diversity only in race and culture and food and clothing is all good and great, but we need to have conversations beyond the status quo. We need to have more conversations about the community members who are diverse as well, and talking about equity. Equity absolutely comes before equality, so we need to be creating these resources, but making sure that everyone has a seat around the table and reaching out to the diverse communities as well, because that's what inclusion looks like. Inclusion means asking someone to come and be part of the conversation and listening in and paying attention, rather than saying we've checked a box and we have someone diverse who belongs to our club. So these are absolutely deeper conversations to have that are challenging at times, but that's how we move the needle forward.
Yeah, and so having this statement is very helpful because it provides a framework for us to have these conversations inside our organization. That's great. We've been, for about the past 2 years, I've been involved in some of these discussions about diversity, equity, inclusion in Rotary. And the common question that we get is, how do I attract more diverse candidates, whether it be women or LGBT persons or young professionals, etc. But my community is just whatever it might be, white, rural, it might be, some other ethnic group as well, or in another country. So I really would appreciate your advice that you could bring to our global membership, to address this particular question. And Rodney, I think you've really started, sharing some ideas there. Why don't you continue on that?
So to start answering that, people need to understand that you have diversity in your community. You have it. Dig into the community you have and work with that. Look at your demographics and find out where the people are that are not in your Rotary Club, and go to them. Go to a Chamber of Commerce after hours and speak to a young business owner or a business professional. Find the organizations that cultivate young professionals and get them involved in your club. Just invite them to a meeting. It starts with an invite. If you have a Black chamber, Hispanic chamber, women's chamber, go to their events. Invite the president or CEO to your Rotary meeting. Have them give a words of inspiration. Rotary was created by businessmen. The business community has an incredible pool of new members for you to choose from. Find a leader from the different communities you want to attract and make them a program. Have them invite their friends to the meeting to hear them speak. Show your club and your public image efforts as a place where everyone is welcome. Have diverse programs and share them online. And when you immerse yourself into your community, you'll become more knowledgeable about the different groups of people in your community.
Yeah, and so Rodney, really, that's one of the very strategic techniques that you've used in Colorado Springs, is that you identified that there were all of these different business groups, built around ethnicity and other special interests, and have been really skillful of bringing them to your Rotary Club, which was predominantly white, and to bring more voices that really are more representative of your community. So congratulations on that, and I think it's a model that we could replicate in other places. Sadia, what are your thoughts on this? How do we approach this?
Yeah, Beth, I'll just add to what Rodney said. It's by action and by practice and being intentional about creating spaces of inclusion and really examining what type of space equity-seeking people are being invited into. Have you created those safe spaces? So think about claiming to be, we are diverse and we do practice equity, versus how you are practicing that in your clubs. Take a look look, deeper look at the term diversity and think about how diversity and inclusion is often the mechanisms used to keep the status quo. So we want you to go beyond the differences in terms of, like I said earlier, race, gender, sexual orientation, and create those relationships and be very intentional and create those inclusive spaces and be mindful of the power dynamics that do exist as well. So center the voices. Once again, create those spaces, and it is really vital for Rotarians to engage in extremely tough discussions regarding diversity and to challenge perceptions and ways of thinking in order to create change. Something, once you feel uncomfortable is when you start doing the self-reflection piece and kind of start having those hard and uncomfortable conversations.
So part of the attraction, being attractive, is also being inclusive as well. And Grant, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that for me, like two key things stand out. We first need to make a public statement that our clubs, Rotary's made that statement, we put that DEI statement out, but we need to make a public statement that our clubs are inclusive. So the Rainbow Heart logo that's on the Fellowship's website, the Rotary DEI statement that you put that on your website. And then something simple like we've been doing, introducing people with their pronouns so that we don't accidentally misgender someone that might be using they and them pronouns. Simple, but really big and public statements. And the other thing that comes to mind is you've got to do the work. You need to start to be inclusive. If we're thinking about LGBTIQ+, and there's sometimes an A and many other letters added to our wonderful rainbow acronym, but learn what those letters mean. Learn about the lived experience of someone with a disability. And then once you've started to do that work, you'll know what questions to ask diverse people in your community. You will be able to start addressing the behaviors that exist in your club. Does that we do a thing called Vine sessions in Australia. Does that Vine session do something that's just a little bit sexist? Did that member say something that made people feel uncomfortable, but it wasn't called out? Like, do the work, be inclusive, and they will come.
Thank you. And I think you've really given a great example about how we need to be mindful of to be inclusive as well. Let's also now think about service, because that's one of our core values. Diversity is a core value of Rotary, one of our 5 core values, as is service. And I'm just, we've talked about unconscious bias today, and let's look at that through the lens of service. And how do we break through biases to be more inclusive as we do our service projects? And are our traditions holding us back? Grant, do you want to continue along the lines?
Yeah, I think our traditions are actually quite important. Some of us meet for dinner. Some of us, here in Australia at least, toast the Queen. These activities are our history and are our culture as Rotary and are important. But to bring in new people, we also need to understand about people with diverse and intersecting identities, understand that they're valuable and start doing the things that we need to do to include them. So that acknowledgement of land that we did at the start, for countries that do that, for Indigenous cultures that ask that we do that, is one extra thing that we can add to our list of traditions, and we certainly do that in Australia really well. Remember that not everyone is always going to be along for the ride, but human rights are universal, and respecting each other is really important. So we bring D&I back to those fundamentals. Think about the human rights, think about the respect that everybody is owed. And I know Rodney will talk about the 4-way test, but we make sure that we do the work and bring it back to the basics. It's about respect and it's about human rights.
Oh, that's great. Rodney, I know you have been you've been very thoughtful about your service, your using service, this portion, this structure of Rotary to really increase diversity. And tell us about how you've done that in Colorado Springs.
So partner with organizations that already exist and do something amazing. Your Rotary Club can serve as volunteers for other organizations in the community. Your club doesn't have to come up with all these service projects. If your club does have a service project, invite other organizations to volunteer with you. This will open your aperture to the diversity in your community. We had a recent service project with our local Habitat for Humanity to work on some home building tasks for folks in need. We invited the Alpha Kappa Alpha, or AKA sorority. This is a service organization, part of the Divine Nine, that people typically join in college and stay involved for life, that is designed for the character and leadership development of African American women. In the US, our new Vice President-elect, Kamala Harris, is a member of that organization. Our club community service director, Samantha Chapman, hey Sam, will be working to include other community organizations in the work we do in the future. Teamwork makes the dream work. Remember that.
That's great. And so what you have done is taken a Rotary Club that was predominantly white, made some transition for adding diversity to membership, and then now you are partnering with one of the premier Black women's groups in our country to do service together. And so that's a great example of connecting with diverse communities to have even better outcomes. So thank you, Rodney. Sadia, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how we approach service and looking at it through our biases.
Yeah, for sure, Beth. And you know, part of Rotary is service, and this is what us Rotarians do. But my conversation around that is get to know the organization that you're doing service along with, or whom you're doing service for. Get to know the individuals, do the deeper work about the organization, talk to someone within that organization, and find out their story, because their story most likely is going to be different than yours. And that will add so much more impact to the service that you're already doing, your club is doing for that organization. So do the deeper work. You know, it's great to do service, great to take on projects, but it should not be just about that. You need to do the deeper work, which means find out what is the organization about, who does it serve, and have conversation with someone who is from that organization as well.
So the idea is let's serve with, not just for changing that power dynamic, and also you can have better connections if we're not just check writers as well, which sometimes we tend to do. So I think we have now covered the questions that we were going to cover through this dialogue, and I'll now turn the floor over to Diana Edwards, our RI Great staff member, who's going to field our questions from the audience and from our participants today. And we're really excited. We have over 500 participants, and we're happy to see everybody here from around the world. Thank you. Diana?
Wow, guys, this has been an excellent panel so far. Like, I'm really pumped up right now. So let's start with a couple of questions we actually received by you all when you registered for the webinar. So feel free to use the Q&A pane to ask other questions if you feel like for the panelists to answer. So the first question is going to Grant. What advice do you have on integrating LGBTQ with certain religious members within a club?
Yeah, and I watched a few questions pop up in the Q&A panel that were similar to this one, and it's about bringing those people along, whether they be religious or anything else. And Beth, if we can just flick to the next slide. And this is, I'm using LGBT plus as an example here, but this is the same for any diversity and inclusion. We know that those, and let me talk about the religious aspect for a quick second, and we know that those religious people can sometimes be really like, I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to allow that gay man to do his thing around me, whatever the thing is, I don't know. But we need to remember that diversity and inclusion is all about behavior. I was speaking about human rights and respect before. Christian values, and I talk about Christian values because I was brought up in a Christian area. It's about behavior. Christian values teach us that we should be welcoming and accepting and loving to our fellow man. But inclusion and diversity and equity, it's not about changing those person's beliefs. They're entitled to their beliefs. They're not entitled to bad behavior. D&I is about providing awareness, not changing personal values. It's about our organization being inclusive of everyone, not inclusive. It's about demonstrating our values of inclusion across all diverse groups, not valuing one over the other. And I think we've done a great job of talking about lots of different diverse groups today. It's about creating a safe environment for all, but also not tolerating behaviors that are damaging to individuals. And I think that is probably the most important thing that I want to say. What we ignore is what we accept. So when you hear that member say that racist, sexist, homophobic statement, just say, hey, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I don't think that aligns with our values. I don't think that aligns with the 4-way test. And the last thing I want to say around LGBT plus is creating an inclusive culture for all people, regardless of whether they are out or not, regardless of whether they share their diverse and intersecting personality, is important. If it's invisible, we still need to be inclusive of it. It's not about forcing them to tell you that they're gay, that they have a disability, or anything else.
That's, Diane, before we go on, I just want to reflect on that for a moment. And Grant, I think you also provided us with some very helpful language for how to call out people when they make us feel uncomfortable. And thank you for those words as well. Diana, back to you.
Grant, you kind of like, you put me to almost tears over here. So thank you for that awesome answer.
Those slides are on the fellowship's website, if I can just plug it one more time.
That was great. Thank you so much. So here's a statement, and I think that the best person to answer this will be Rodney. So here it goes. By giving equal status of Rotarians to Rotaractors, the importance of Rotarians will be undermined. What do you think, Rodney?
I think that speaks to a scarcity mindset. And as Rotarians, in order to be the most effective, we need to have an abundance mindset. Those young Rotaractors deserve a seat at the table. People who can internalize and understand the Rotary 4-way test at a young age are impressive people. Rotaractors are engaging, innovative, and most of all, the future of this great global organization. They are growing up in a digital world and can bring a fresh perspective to new and existing problems that Rotary International is committed to resolving. I ask that you pour your knowledge into them, mentor them, because they are the future of Rotary International.
Rodney, they're not just the future, they're the now. They're with us right now. They're equal. They're the future. They're the now. They're all of those things. Proud past Rotaractor here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Rodney. Sadia, this one's coming your way. How can we deal with resistance to change? This is a hard one for a lot of people. How can we deal with it?
Well, thank you for that, Diana. And resistance to change is a challenge because human brains are wired to resist change. We are so comfortable in our status quo and in what's comfortable, the routine. But it's the strong leadership will set the tone and that will lead change. Look at Rodney, look at Grant, they've set that tone and they're saying, let's lead and let's go and let's make this change happen. And change happens when those in power lay it down for the benefit of others, right? Change happens when instead of talking for people, we step back and we give them a voice. And it's hard and it's sacrificial and it's humbling. So as Rotarians, we value diversity and celebrate the contributions of people of all backgrounds. Like our statement says, regardless of their age, ethnicity, race, color, abilities. So I would encourage the club leaders to recognize this and lead in the ways that help your club members to overcome resistance. It's all about engagement and understanding why. Change, everyone is responsible for the change within their club. It's everyone's responsibility. The world is constantly changing and we must be prepared to change with it. Resist the status quo. Otherwise, we will be stuck in the times, and Rotary must keep up with the times. Rotary owes its resilience resiliency to being willing to change with times. Effectively engage with members, listen, encourage openness and honesty, and have the hard and the brave conversations. Implement change in several stages. Communication is the key when you are talking about change, and having access to resources. And we talked about, the guest speakers and coming up with an action plan as well.
Great. Diana, do we have time for one more?
Absolutely.
Let's do one real quick one, and then we're going to go to our close.
Okay, sure. So this one says, what are some of the ways to reach out to new diverse communities when the economies of our clubs are too expensive? Come on, you guys, we'll take that one.
I don't think, this is an interesting question that I've heard a lot of times, and it's never been a blocker for me. We make the time and we make the money for the things that we care about. If someone's telling you that they can't afford Rotary, dig deeper. What are they actually telling you? Because I guarantee you that they will make the time and they will make the money if it's important to them. So is your club meeting the needs of your community? Is it enabling a young person to feel that they have a voice? Is it doing inclusive projects? I never think Rotary is about the money. People will make things work if they value it.
So we have many, many types of flexibility that for our organization to make it work for people. And it's up to us as club members to embrace that and make that available for us to be more inclusive. Great. I know we're getting close to the end of our webinar time today. And so I want to just share a slide about taking action. When we do these webinars, we always want to encourage everyone to take action. And for me, as I have listened to our speakers today, there are three things that I take home. One is that we have bridges in many of our clubs, and sometimes we just don't know they are there. Take a fresh look at your club and who could be that bridge to help you and your club reach out to diverse communities and the broader community in your area. So, and empower that person and support that person. Second, we heard some really great advice from Grant and everyone about accountability and how to call out inappropriate behavior. In February, we'll be back with the third webinar, which is called Holding Each Other Accountable, which is going to be all about giving us tools to do that in a more comfortable manner. And then a third takeaway that I have today is that if you feel uncomfortable about something, investigate why. And I just want to give a personal reflection. For people my age, we don't normally have not used our pronouns, mine being she and her. It's because of just the period that I have had my profession through. But I'm a professor now, and in the last 2 years when I've been in teaching, I've seen the young people take on pronouns in their signature statements. And as I investigated that, I realized how important this is for our new generation of members of our club. There's going to be a great video on the Rotary Learning Center where we'll have all of where we're collecting all of our resources. And I encourage you to watch that video if that's been something that's been curious for you, because it's important for us to stay up to date with the people that we want our future membership and current membership as well. And so now I'd like to turn back to our panel for their final 30-second closing thoughts on the power of connection with diverse communities. And Sadia, we'll begin with you, your final words to our wonderful participants today.
Absolutely, Beth. And you talk about the sharing of pronouns. What that does is it creates those safe and equitable and safe space and welcoming space. As soon as I introduce myself with my pronouns, that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm creating that safe space for someone who's coming into my club. I'll just talk about and build it back to the importance of self-accountability. And self-accountability is not an easy process. It's an uncomfortable process. It challenges us to look inwards into our own biases and the judgments and avoid making assumptions, to examine our own privilege and be aware of potential power dynamics that are within a space. So I will encourage, and those are my 30-second thought, is do the self-accountability piece, hold yourselves to be self-accountable, and when you do that, you're being part of the solution, you're building trust, and you're moving forward.
Wonderful. Rodney, your final thoughts.
Social justice is not political, okay? Human rights are not political. Peace and conflict resolution is one of our 7 areas of focus. And if you ever find yourself feeling threatened by change, look to the 4-way test and the 7 areas of focus. Those changes likely fall into everything that attracted you to Rotary in the first place. Embrace it. Love each other and be kind. Listen more than you talk, and trust the cultural experiences that your fellow Rotarians are sharing with you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. And those are really wonderful thoughts. And Grant?
Do the work. Be kind. Talk to those diverse and intersecting people in your community, and remember to always be kind, and please reach out to us if you have any questions or want any support. I'm certainly available through the fellowship's website.
Wonderful. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope we have inspired you to think more about the power of connection with diverse communities. And my closing words are as well, let's all be kind. Thank you very much.